Hey guys, Infidel1258 here. Today I want to speak to some comments in the comment section and I want to draw a point around frustrations. I think frustrations are high, especially around liquidity bots and rewards at the highest level, as well as probably if I was to really put one finger on one topic, it's probably the fact that SPS is well below where we want it to be. And truth be told, if that number rises, it will buoy our spirits. That's my Cole's notes on where we're at. But I'm going to read some comments that I think point towards some of the frustration you're carrying and maybe give a little bit of magnification to some of the thoughts you guys are sharing. I'm going to rip through a bunch, but I'm going to try and finish on a positive note, something around foundations. So it's a bit of a conversation around why we're frustrated within Splinterlands, and then it's maybe one final hopeful note with respect to the next piece for Splinterlands, which is the foundations mode. Okay, so let's do that. If it sounds interesting, stick around. Otherwise, grab the next video. Thanks, guys. So usually when I review my comments from my comment section, I kind of just grab some random comments and, I answer 3 different comments from 3 different videos. Today is going to be a bit different because there is a ton of energy and let's say concern, frustration, disappointment, annoyance, even maybe anger around some of the issues around the highest level rewards, particularly as it pertains to the liquidity bots and the matchmaking within Splinterlands. Because while liquidity bots provide matching for every level to play, preventing long wait times for a match, they can be a pushover at the lowest levels, or at any level, they can be a pushover, which feels like free wins. And we don't want that because that's free payouts of cryptocurrency that from a pool that we want to extract from. So free wins is a bad thing, but also they can be intensely difficult. And there's people saying that they're super hard at various levels. They're really easy at other levels. And it doesn't sound like there's even a consensus around which levels they're most difficult or dialed in at. So let's read a variety of comments around this topic, starting with Tails. And he speaks to our ongoing conversation over the last couple of weeks where we've been kind of both directly and indirectly talking to this issue with one another and with others. And I did a video called Bots Aren't the Problem, but they need to change. And I talked about a variety of things in there, but I think if I recall correctly, one of my main points was that we could reimagine how bots work altogether. And I really think it makes some sense to, if you imagine bots as in the game of Splinterlands for matchmaking purposes as a good thing, then you might conclude we just need to dial in the difficulty in order to make them optimized and make them enjoyable, make them beneficial, and make them good. But I think it's more complicated than that because it's not just are they excellent or are they terrible? It's actually a nuanced thing where at Gold League, what does an excellent team look like? And at Silver and at Bronze and at Diamond and at Champion. And every one of those leagues is a very different game, as we well know. Those who know Splinterlands know that. And so that's going to mean that supplying each one of those, the first difficulty meter or function of difficulty on any one of those accounts will be not how intense or how versed is the bot at selecting the most optimized kit, but actually the first metric or measurement or meter that we can use to manipulate that bot's difficulty is actually the card supply it has. Does it have, at Gold League levels, does it have a perfect Gold League deck? Yes or no? Does it have a perfect Silver deck at the highest level leagues of Gold? It's possible to think through modifications on the card supply that it has access to in order to be the first manipulator of its power and its precision and its acumen within the game, right? And that then is the first meter that we can adjust to find the best bot for every single level. It doesn't have to be the case that at Gold League it has a Gold deck, at Diamond League it has a Diamond deck. And even when you get between Diamond and Champ, what's the distinction there? So that's the larger conversation that I had in that video. And Tails has a thing to say. He says, since I made my original video almost 2 weeks ago, the liquidity bot tuning in the game has significantly changed. They are more difficult now, and the win rate reflects this. I don't actually have that data, but I am going to trust Tails on that fact. So I'm going to take that as he's correct in that, but I don't have that data for me to personally draw on. He goes on to say, this fact was left at other video commentary. True, because I don't have the numbers. So I think that video was maybe just a response to conversations from the community and just off the top thoughts. So he's right. I didn't mention that because I didn't have that information. And I am going to assume it's right though. he's probably accurate. So then he goes on to say that's an important piece, and you're right. If the data has radically shifted in the last week or two, that affects the conversation. But I would still say I'm less concerned about what is the win rate percentage of any one bot at any one level, and I'm more concerned with what are the tools we're equipping them with, because again, that's the metric that I think makes the most sense to manipulate down. Because here's the thing. If we want to say that, and let me finish this point first. He talks about like what's the right level of win rate for these things, 50, 60, 40%, because we could tune these bots so they kick our butts 70% of the time probably. That's actually possible if you give it every card and you allow it to utilize the best strategies and the most optimized, winning potential, data. I think we probably could tune it to be like that. That doesn't make any sense. So I don't actually think the short answer to his question is like, I don't think finding a percentage win rate is directly the answer to the conversation. Obviously it is indirectly related, but the issue is not so much how do you tune it or what precision with which do you tune it, because you have to either make it intentionally dumb so that it's not optimizing its play, or you have to make sure it's entirely optimizing its play. And that would be one way of measuring its victory. But the other piece of data that you can control is what cards does it have access to. And so, if we went and said there are certain key cards that are meta within the context of the modern league right now, Keelan Gaines, Tofu, who else? Who do I lose a lot to? Probably still. Oh man, I'm forgetting her name right now. Venka the Vile. You could name probably 10 or 20 cards that you might say are really, really overpowered. And why don't we sort of pull back on some of those levers by not giving them either those cards at all or giving them lower league level versions of it? You can be in Diamond and play with a Silver League Venka the Vile. I do. And a champion even. And at times that's a winning card. So I think that's the place where there's the most nuance. And I think that's the piece that I see Tails missing in his conversation around win rate. Of course, that will affect the win rate, but it isn't a conversation of how do we tune them to win. Like it isn't saying, intentionally try your hardest on 60% of the matches. That would be the easy way, but that's also going to create these like stupid answers in various situations because it's trying to like just make that average. So it's kind of throwing in some instances. Take some tools away from it in the sense of card collection, and then you're hamstringing its ability to win. I think that's the pathway forward. At least that's one of my main suggestions, and I kind of don't see Tails responding to that. So that was the first point, and that'll be the deepest point that we dive on in this video. The rest are going to be a little faster. Again, some of this is salty, and we will finish with in a good place around the foundation conversation, okay? Zena. The last week of the season, the bots started hitting hard, no joke. Tails, Mondred, and Rogue have been asked about this, and there we go. Maybe you have to ask them, how does it feel now? I'm 100% sure that Siler can turn on hardcore mode anytime he's ready. I think that's true. Again, growing up, I played a lot of video games. I used to play, do you guys, maybe you're old enough to remember N64. One of my favorite games, GoldenEye. You'd get together with 4 of your buddies and you guys would take turns, multiplayer, split screen, taking each other out. Awesome game, super fun. Another version of that game was called Perfect Dark. It was a different game, but a similar vibe with a futuristic sort of interface, like guns and more of a futuristic environment. I bring it up because that game was one of the first ones that actually had bots that you could run against. And so you could put cooperatively, it could be you and your best bud, split screen, same screen against 4 bots, or I forgot how many you could manage. It might have been 8 or 10 or something. And they could be set on insane difficulty and you could just never win. And what would happen in those shooter moments is that the thing hits headshots every single time. It doesn't miss ever. And in some sense, it's just cheating to win. And so if you crank up the difficulty to a place where it literally just, in some sense, you might call it cheats to win, then even in games like Splinterlands, it's going to know precisely the set of cards that is the victory condition, right? And even within the context of, can a bot even track? Could a bot be told to look at, I don't think this is true, but is it possible that when you submit your team, the bot can see what you submit? No, I think the answer is no, because it's not locked into blockchain. It's kept on Splinterlands servers. But you could imagine pathways and development techniques that would allow someone to literally cheat by knowing what you've picked and encounter it. And so I'm saying bots can be set to this crazy broken place. And I'm sure he's right. That would be quote unquote hardcore mode. But nobody wants that, because that's not really, and that's not what Veo is saying. He's just saying, like, look, we're inching towards that now. No longer are they pushovers. Maybe they're now too hard. And I think, yeah, the difficulty is dialing it in, isn't it? Let's keep going. Pompey commented. He was one of the ones that commented in that prior video. He says it's not a bot problem. It's a time problem. Who has time to play wild modern survival and the new foundation, make energy tradable. That was a point he raised before. And it's an interesting point. Again, I don't want to rehash that whole conversation, but you'd have to reimagine how you even get energy. It couldn't just be you buy an account and then suddenly you're getting 25 energy every single day. That doesn't make any sense. It would have to be collection power or something like a SPS staked or something. Interesting conversation, separate from today, so we'll move on. Gage dropped a comment. He's absolutely too hard over the last week or so. Talk about putting players off. Geez. And this is a point that I think is going to be rehashed throughout the comments here. And I think is a concern, right? This is the trick. If bots can't be dialed in a way that allows us to have an enjoyable play, an enjoyable experience as players, then that's a problem. They're here to increase our match liquidity so that we don't have to have these insane wait times, so that we can find a playable game with somebody who's reasonably matched to our skill set, giving us a chance to play quickly, earn quickly, and move on with our day. If they're failing to provide a significant piece of that picture, like, it's one thing to provide me a match, it's another thing to provide me a match that's relatively balanced or fair. If you're going to crush me every single time I queue up against you, because the bot has all the expertise and the talent and the data that I lack, then I would argue we're moving away from entertainment, and it's going to be off-putting to players. That's a big concern. Drillith? Yeah, Drillith. Doesn't use CP as an energy distribution. Sounds like a survival. See another commenter thinking about how we would reimagine energy distribution. I think it would have to be using collection power or staking SPS. But again, let's focus on some of the bot conversations. The bots are a joke, says Apollo, especially in survival mode. You can play max decks and lose to a gold deck. The bots are just too hard to beat. I think for some, yes, and for some, no. And maybe we have to have a hard conversation about, like, the thing I hope we're seeing is we're not getting bogged down in a conversation of, are bots difficult to beat, therefore they're bad, therefore get rid of them. Because that is too short-sighted. You have to bring the full conversation, the complicated conversation, which is this. So how complicated, how bad are bots in their current state? Bad or good are they? Why are they bad? Why are they good? If we remove them, why would that be good? Why would that be bad? And then weighing the fullness of those two juxtapositions against one another. Because the reality is that bots within the game provide certain services that are beneficial to players, both brand new and long term. And if we fail to overlook that, we can get into these short-sighted sort of, let's say, quips about how the game is now broken because of bots. It's such a simplistic perspective, and I'm not saying Apollo's saying this, I'm not saying anyone has said this, but I really am trying to caution us, because I'm feeling a negative energy toward the bots in general, and seems to be like a conclusion is being drawn that they're problematic, and they're too problematic, and they can't be fixed, and they're hurting the game, and that is not being held up against the other side of the coin, which is they are providing a service around liquidity matches. And when we remove them, it's not just about extra long wait times. It's about finding matches with reasonably similar difficulty and power level accounts. If I have to wait 5 minutes to find a match, and when I get matched, I'm playing against somebody with 700 RP more than me, which I've seen, by the way. I've seen 800, 900. My opponent has 1,000 more rank points than me. They're in a different stratosphere of difficulty and acumen within the game of Splinterlands. And yet the game says this is the person you got to play against. Wow. I mean, hold those two problems up against one another before you make an opinion about matchmaking liquidity bots in Splinterlands. And then also there's another conversation beyond that of how difficult would it be to dial in the bots, because if our major criticism is they're too difficult, how hard is it to bring that down a notch? If our major criticism is they're too easy, how difficult is it to dial it up a notch? Those dials and how easy or difficult they are to maneuver is a factor within the conversation of whether or not we should move away from bots, as opposed to the factors and considerations around the first, improving match liquidity with real peer-to-peer player base. That would be optimal, but that's a bigger and more difficult ask than the bot conversation. We're talking about how do we introduce 10,000 new players in Splinterlands? How do we introduce another 100,000 new players in Splinterlands? Even 5,000 would be crazy, would be awesome. But that lever is not as easy to manipulate. And even if you do pull that lever by whether it's new, bringing on new players because of advertising or because of, new game development or altcoin bull market stuff like SPS pumping, all of that doesn't necessarily mean that every single league of the Splinterlands ecosystem is going to have an equal proportion of new player base and maybe well-distributed player base growth. If bronze has, crazy match liquidity, but silver doesn't, or gold doesn't, or diamond or champ doesn't, the problem still persists. So then let's not throw away the baby and the bathwater. Let's think this through on both sides. Let's keep going. iHorse says, wouldn't need bots if we had advertising and players. So interesting. I didn't read this comment before, but he's making the same point I just made, which is that if we wanted to move away from bots, which is what people are pointing to, no one said that, but they're complaining about bots and what they do or don't do within the game. And so the implication is we want to shut them down, move away from them, go back to peer-to-peer only, human only. But then, this is the thing, like if we could do that, great, but it's not that easy until I think we're getting something like 400 new accounts every month or something, which is great. But again, even if you fast forward 10 months and we're up 4,000 or 5,000 new accounts in Splinterlands, the conversation still has to be had. Are they investing at higher and higher levels, or are they lingering in those foundation mode rule sets, or are they playing at this bronze level wild account or modern account? Because that won't improve liquidity for every single league necessarily. And so I don't even know if I need to read iHorse's full comment, but just out of respect to him, I want to say this is weird though that every player will stay for years is crazy. Matt has lost his mind. Why? So you're feeling some salt, iHorse. Haven't talked to you in a minute, pal, but I can see you're still feeling some of that spice. Appreciate you for dropping through on the comment, though. Yeah, I'll leave it there. He's got his concerns about the game, the developers, and our direction, but he's also a big investor. And so, iHorse puts his money where his mouth is, and he has a reason to be vocal because he's invested in the game. So I'll move on from there. Pomp is back, and he said another thing. They should make a mirror bot. Bots can only play cards that the player has, so the match comes down to skill and RNG. But I don't think even this will fix the problem. Not only we don't have enough players, but there are more modes, and players that are here don't have enough time to waste daily on the game. I wouldn't call it waste, but this is a fair point, right? There's more and more modes within the game, and I think that makes logical sense because we're trying to attract different audiences and participation at different levels. But at the same time, it creates these different lanes that players can walk down, which means that it's like if you have a party in a massive field, maybe nobody even sees each other because the field is so gigantic or the space is too large. But when you divide it into rooms, a party can feel much more intimate, much more close, much more connected, and much more fun. And I think the same applies within a rank experience of a blockchain-based NFT video game like Splinterlands. If we have 5 different ways to play the game, and maybe you only play way number 1 Modern League, you're never going to run into the wild players, you're never going to run into the land players, you're never going to run into the foundation players, etc. And so that diversification, while interesting from a attracting different players standpoint, is also problematic because it divides our player base in terms of our attention, and we only have so much attention to spend. So I think that's interesting. And I also think that the mirror bot idea is, I wonder what that would, my question about that would be, would the mirror bot have to react after you submitted your team? Because then I would think the bot would have 100% win rate possibility, because it knows not just which cards you've played, but in what order you've played them. And a reaction to that could put you in being able to react to that I would say would give you a strong probability of victory, I think. And I could be wrong about that, but it's an interesting conversation. Again, let's get creative on how we think through bots before we throw away bots, right? Let's keep going. There's a few more interesting comments I saw here. There's a real problem with the system of energy and as a tradable good. First, as you pointed out, it focuses on energy generation rate to be tied to level investment. The problem with that is that the result is limiting newer and older, lower level players, from playing the game. I don't want to get too far down that rabbit hole because, again, I want to focus on the matchmaking real conversation. But I think you're right, Rudy. If we were to try and reward value investment in the game exclusively or to the detriment of brand new players, we are saying something about who we want to stay, who we want to play, and who we don't. And I think you're probably right. We need to strike some balance where we are encouraging, inviting, incentivizing new players while doing the same with old. And probably CP as an energy production rate, or SPS staked as an energy production rate conversation possibly would hurt newer players in that way, wouldn't it? Interesting thoughts. Thank you. Keegs, good to see you, pal. I also agree they should be different pools. It would make Wild almost achieve what they are hoping Survival would do. Oh, the different energies. He's saying that there should be an energy level for Wild, an energy level for Modern. Interesting, but coming back to Pomp's point, like, we only have so much time to play the game every day, and what would that do to the attention of the player base? Let's finish the conversation here. We talked about the matchmaking, our concerns around bots, and how we find liquidity for matching in the game of Splinterlands. We talked about previously the reward structure and how paying out, at the highest levels can be massive versus the lowest levels can be really trivial. And there's so much to be, let's say, concerned about and have these really important conversations over. And I don't think the conversations are done, not now and probably not ever, because we're going to continue to iterate and think through what we do. But we can finish this conversation in a positive way. Some of that's salty. Some of that conversation is salty, frustrated, difficult. We're disappointed in some of that stuff. But then I see What the Pick coming back, and he says, "Thanks for the response, Dwayne. This was on a different video. Was I wrong? Splinterlands rewards are being exploited." And I kind of came back and said that they are being exploited at the highest levels, because the highest league players are receiving massive rewards and free energy while they play. But I also said that those big investments in some sense change or tweak my mind around whether it's quote unquote an exploit. And yet the word probably applies. However, my conclusion is that the reward structure is not the ultimate issue. It's dialing in liquidity bot difficulty. We've talked about that in this video. So What the Pick says, "Thanks for the response." And he says, "I agree that gameplay rules are set and the rewards are designed for the highest players to extract those rewards. It may be the price we have to pay given how long the game is run." I think he means in that way, it's like the rewards at the highest level, there are certain people who are deeply invested. They're going to have extra tools and extra abilities that you and I don't, and therefore they're going to win more in certain scenarios and situations, and it's going to be a product of their time in the system that they're going to get those rewards. I think that's what he's saying there. He says, on the positive note, Foundations mode is fun. The limited cards and make the gameplay more exciting. I feel that simply simplifying the game is where the fun is. I end up with a lot more draws, said with love. And so that's interesting conversation, because Foundation mode addresses the problem of balanced gameplay. It resets the game in a way that has not been since alpha beta. The whole new game mode, I'll probably be playing Foundations more than Modern for a while, which is super interesting because actually, despite all the difficulty, maybe the frustration I quoted and I answered in this video around all the issues we talked about today, Foundations mode was a comment that I saw 2 or 3 people made. Somebody said, "Hey Dwayne, why haven't you done a Foundations mode video yet? Maybe create one and show us your gameplay footage." I also saw that, you know, there are other content creators covering this stuff too. And I think the return to simplicity or an option therein is going to be effective at reaching and encouraging a certain audience of players. Now, is that going to be something like a Kezrin, those highest league level players come back to play? I kind of doubt it. The guy has $500,000 worth of cards on one account. He's probably got, either he's playing himself or he's got an amazing scholar who rocks in Modern League and plays every single tournament to receive the most financial reward possible. But that's one community of players, those who have deep pockets and who are committed to the game. The other conversation that what the pick is pointing to is there's reason to be excited for the other side of the community, those who are not holding thousands or hundreds of, maybe even hundreds of dollars worth of cards. They're just here, brand new. That number's been growing, by the way. It's been like hundreds every month. It's been a few every day. I think 4 a day, 4 or 5 a day. And I think it might be like 300 to 500 over the last 90 days. It's all available on Peak Monsters if you want to check it under dashboard. But the point is, new players are coming and they are getting connected. So then are they going to find the thing that grabs them? It's probably not going to be leaderboard rewards in Champion that is going to hook them, because they're not going to be competing at that level. But maybe Foundations is that pathway. So I will actually try to create. I'm excited that there's this tone of excitement around that, because there was this conversation around frustration about these other issues. And so let's close with it like this. I'm hopeful that we're going to be able to dial in matchmaking liquidity bots in Splinterlands in a way that makes sense moving forward. That will take iteration. It will take time. And I think the dials at our disposal are not just how difficult do we set the bot to be, but actually what cards are in its possession. And some combination of manipulating those two variables will allow us to find appropriate leveled win rates for various bots at various levels. I think that's the pathway forward. And I do think matchmaking and liquidity bots are helpful for the game of Splinterlands in more ways than one. And it is problematic to get smacked around by them, but it's also problematic to wait 5 minutes for a match and then get beaten up by somebody 3 leagues above you. And so something has to happen, either new player-based growth or matchmaking and liquidity bots being corrected. And I think the easier path is going to be the LPs for now. Ultimately, as we see player-based growth, maybe we revisit this conversation. Setting all that aside, let's look towards confidence and joy that there is modes and tools and ways to experience the Splinterlands ecosystem today that didn't exist before, that are far more geared towards the new, towards the brand new player with limited investment, that hopefully can be a hook and a way to grab and keep their attention. I'm hopeful for this. I hope you are too. Let me know in the comments below. Have an amazing day. God bless.